Steve, I have to ask you this because you knew Michael for over 40 years. As we approach this trial, there's going to be a lot of talk about Michael Jackson and his drug habit and the things that he took or what he may have been involved in. How do you think this trial is going to affect the way that we see Michael Jackson?
I think whatever, like Mr. Garcia said, something happened that night. Dr. Murray knows, and unfortunately my friend is not here to defend himself, but I think the trial will show, I mean, the effects of stardom. What happens, people get what they want, unfortunately, you know. And you said $100,000 a month is a very beautiful salary. Look at it. No matter who it is like that. Something went wrong in that room, unfortunately. That was out of his control, probably, Michael's control. Something happened, very unfortunate.
I wonder how the trial's going to affect the children. I'm sorry, I just have to ask. You've been around the children so much. How is this trial going to affect the children?
I think it's going to, it might bring up old, you know, some old wounds, you know, dealing with his death and everything else, because I know how close they were with him and they crushed him. I think they're going to be, you know, very upset. But at the same time, they might be protected a little bit from, you know, so much TV and things like that for their, you know, for their own benefit. But I think that, you know, it's gonna hurt them because that's their daddy.
We've got more from our Michael Jackson insiders. Take a look at a preview of what's next.
He called it the waves of love, the applause. He felt very comfortable. He could put a bed on stage. He felt that comfortable.
We know Michael Jackson felt the love on the stage, but did that love extend to his family?
So you actually reward people for staying with you?
Yep, the longer you stay with us, the more you save. And when you switch from another company to us, we even...
Welcome back to Special Report. You know, on stage, Michael Jackson was a natural. He was born to entertain. But out from under the bright lights, he was a completely different person. Our roundtable examines the difference between Michael and the King of Pop. I want to talk about his mother, because you said he loved his mother the most.
Very much.
Really? All of you agree to that?
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
He called her Kate.
To his mother. Yeah. Of course he did. He loved his mother.
I mean, right now, this woman
Janet.
cries right now. You can't even mention his name sometimes. She breaks out and cries.
Yeah. I stood in line for 3 hours for an iPhone for her. Because he wanted to give it to her so he could put the children's pictures. Yes. We put the children's pictures in the iPhone so we could give it to him. So he was very tight with his mother, yes.
She called him her baby. That was her. I mean, right now, you could have talk with her, have dinner or lunch, or go to the house sometime. And you could mention she just welled up and cries. She can't believe it. I called after he died. I called her right away. I said, can you believe this? She said, I can't believe it's real. That's what the kids are out at Havenhurst. I know it's real because other than that, so she couldn't even fathom that this happened. It was.
Anthony, would he have been who he was musically in terms of his success without his mother and his father? Did he need both of them to become who he was?
You know, it's hard to tell what would have happened if he was in some other situation. Certainly, I think what he got, you know, this idea of his drive, as we've been discussing, I think is something that really came from his father. And, you know, the kind of degree of studying, I mean, as something that he did, you know, he would look at tapes and films of James Brown and Jackie Wilson and study even as a little boy. You know, he wanted it, you know, he really wanted it. And I think ultimately that, you know, the stages where Michael was most alive, I mean, Michael's life was a kind of performance in a way. I mean, that moment that you described of him with the press turning and putting his hands on his hips and walking away, it was like a showman, you know, and I think that those things really electrified him. There was a Rolling Stone story one time. He went to see Queen with the reporter, and he was watching, you know, watching the band on stage, and he just goes like, man, look at them, like they're on fire. Like he was like, I want that. I want to be there. You know, I think that was where he felt the freest and the most himself.
He felt free on stage.
Well, was he more?
But I tell you something also, Catherine Jackson. It was her vision, her sister-in-law, her vision, way before Mr. Jackson, to see her sons as a group. People don't realize that. It was her.
Not to take any credit away from his father, though. I think that he had so much of it in him. I think he would have been noticed regardless. I mean, he was just a natural-born entertainer.
Was who he was. Was he more
showman, like he said.
Was he more comfortable being a showman, or was he more comfortable being himself?
A showman. He felt at home.
Yes.
He called it waves of love, the applause. He felt very comfortable. He could put a bed on stage. He felt that comfortable.
Right.
Yes.
The guy you see on the stage and when you see him in private, it's two separate people. He's shy, and things like that, when he's not on stage. But, we were back out here in New York and we did a photo shoot. And he was, he was kind of, I don't want to say nervous, but he wasn't, being kind of stiff. And once they played the music, it was whoop, a whole nother person.
I think in a strange way, Michael Jackson never really came to know who he was. He had complete command over his stage presence, and that's where, as the fellas say, he came alive. That was fabulous for him. But to sit in a room by himself and decide, this is who I am, this is where I want to go today, I think he felt a little lost in his personal self. And he was highly talented, not only in singing, but in drawing. He was very well read. He had...
and children.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a serious business person.
Bingo.
Just
Very
somebody in a room.
So.
I mean, you see the films of Michael going like, oh, hi, But people said, when he was in a room and talking about a plan or making just what the plan was going to be for a record or for what he was doing, was no nonsense.
Yeah.
There were people he trusted, but he learned to trust his own ideas and had a clear sense of like, this is the way that this is going to go.
I mean, he was an astute businessman. Even pulling it, or do you want to say it, I mean, it sounds crazy, pulling the wool over Paul McCartney's eyes to get the Beatle catalog.
Exactly.
Which is true. Absolutely.
Which many people resented. People resented the fact that he was a black American. A black American owned this white catalog.
See, that's interesting because a lot of times in Michael Jackson's life, he was accused of not really being aware of what it was like to experience being black, that he didn't identify with the African-American experience. But you're saying that he actually...
Joseph and Catherine Jackson instilled the black history. Every time he went to Chicago, he would go to Johnson Publications, the late John Johnson and Bob Johnson from Jet Ebby magazine, give him archaic archive footage of Michael Jackson, the old blues people in Chicago. I mean, the Muddy Waters.
So he was aware of his heritage.
Oh, absolutely. He knew who he was, exactly.
Really?
He knew what he was. No matter what you do to your skin or like nobody's business or your face, he knew he was black. Every black person knows that. But how light you are in America? What you do to your nose, your lips, your eyes, you're still black.
All right, we're going to get into that in a second too. But I want to let's go back a little bit, and I want to go to when he split from his brothers, split from the Jackson Five. Anthony, I'm wondering how difficult it must have been for him to be a young man. How old was he at that point?
Well,
and to make that split from his family, in a sense, it's like saying, hey, my family, which looms large in my life, I'm going to go out on my own and do what I need to do.
I think it's kind of freeing for him,
Well, I think it was a little, I mean, I think it was liberating. By that point, I think Michael had a very clear sense about what he wanted to do musically, and, he found the perfect producer for him, and then made, Off the Wall, which is still just a fantastic record. I think that he had a sense at that point, he was by that point a young man. He's in his 20s. I think he wanted to be like the way anybody breaks away from their family a little bit and, moves out on their own and establishes their own life. I think he felt like that he could take music to a new place. And, it was right exactly at that right moment. Rhythm was happening, but there was like a lot of, fusions going on. Michael was sensitive to it all. He loved all kinds of music. And that was, it was like the perfect artist found the perfect moment.
Who was the real Michael Jackson? And here's the key. How will he be remembered?
You will remember the negative about Michael Jackson, but overall, worldwide, without a doubt, it's going to be Michael Jackson's music.
Introducing new Pro Nutrients from Centrum. Omega-3s go beyond heart health. Probiotics go beyond digestive balance. And fruit and veggie has antioxidant properties. New.
I want to finish up just with a question about Michael's legacy. And Anthony, I want to start with you. You've covered Michael Jackson for so long throughout his life. You've seen the impact he's had on his music, on music in this country.
Around the world.
Yes, you're right, around the world. Good point. How would you quantify his impact on music? What kind of influence has he had on the music that we hear today?
He's one of the handful of significant artists in popular music. I mean, you know, if you talk about the Beatles or Sinatra or, you know, whoever you want to name, Bob Dylan, you know, Michael Jackson's in that category. He's at the absolute apex of importance and significance. And I think finally that is going to be his legacy. I think, you know, we've seen it in many other instances. You know, it's one thing for biographers or filmmakers or, you know, all of these things will be explored over time. But I think for most people, as time goes on and the day-to-day drama and melodrama of Michael Jackson's life, what finally you're going to be left with is being in the club and having, you know, Thriller come on, or having Billie Jean come on, or having, you know, any number of dozens of songs come on, and just lighting the place up. And, you know, that, you know, in a lot of ways, to me, is the real Michael Jackson. I mean, I think that's finally really what he cared about the most for himself. And, you know, I think he achieved a lot of what he wanted. You know, whether he understood that or not, I think he achieved a lot of what he ever wanted, you know, in his music.
Diane, ultimately, 50 years from now, when people hear the name Michael Jackson, what do they think? What legacy do you think he leaves?
I think that there are some people who will remember the negative about Michael Jackson, but overall, worldwide, without a doubt, it's going to be Michael Jackson's music. It's going to live on for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and yours too.
You know, Steve, you've known him for so many years. You knew him even when he was a little boy. Now, your friend, somebody who you called a brother, is gone. What do you miss most about Michael Jackson?
His friendship, his kindness. He was very generous. I mean, he was sometimes unreal sometimes. I mean, he was just so kind. He was too kind. Like, that's why he's dead now. But I will say, I think his image, music, will live on.
You know, Mike, I'll finish with you. So many people love Michael Jackson, but I think we talk so much about his children, and it seems in many ways his children loved him the most. Tell us something that you saw in working for Michael Jackson that shows you how much he loved his children, and tells us something about their relationship. Give us an example.
Well, besides, you know, every morning making breakfast for, you know, for the children, I would personally, you know, by myself take them to, say, Circus, and my phone wouldn't stop ringing. You know, what are they doing? You know, what ride did they go on? Where did they paint their face? What are they eating? You know, so, you know, it's things like that, you know, that just shows, especially being in the entertainment business where you're so busy, you know, this guy, he took the time to be a father for these kids.
Incredible to hear. I'm Ryan Smith, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Legends are born in October. Embrace the spirit of the MLB postseason as the best teams in baseball test the limit of their potential.
The ball is gone. Look at that hustle play.
Every game of the Division Series, every game of the NLCS.